And Bershus the Marda Asra, Rabboni Ha'ir, Ronan Rabboni Rabbeisai. It seems that the Sofa HaMuduberes in this Beis HaKnesses is Yiddish. I'm going to speak in the Sofa She'ena Muduberes. Seit mir Michael sein, but unfortunately for me, this is Mama Loshen. I just want to be Peiseh B'chvayt Ha'achsanya on the tremendous amount of effort and Yigiyah that the Morda Asra, Moshe Peretz Schwartz, put in this Asifa. I don't know if you have looked through this yet, but even this took a tremendous amount of work. About the Chashivas of Davening, the Chaimer, which the Mashgiach with great Mesiras Nefesh wanted to emphasize, the great Chaimer of Sicha Tefilah during Davening. And to put this together, Asifa, this is a Mamish L'Shem Shamayim, because he feels the need in this Beis HaKnesses and all Batei Knesses to be Ma'ayra the Chashivas of Davening and Bifrat the Chaimer of Sicha Tefilah during Davening. So Yasher Kaich Achai, Mezakis Harabim Ein Chet Ba'al Yadai, Benishim Shed Ben Shimon his Mishpacha, Chol Anil V'Meilov, the whole Kehila, that they should be Zeicha to a good Geben Shteyar, Ksiv Ksiv Taiva, should be Zeicha, L'chol Mila Demeitav, Baruach U'V'Geshem Bazeh U'V'Ba. It is one of the great curiosities of Yiddishkeit that there are few things that are more important than davening, and yet there are very few things that are as neglected as davening. We're approaching the Yomim Noirayim. People will spend, in speaking out in Esrig, hours and hours and hours. They will look at Hadassim and they will spend countless hours to make sure that they're Meshulish, they're Mohuder, hours upon hours upon hours. When it comes to Pesach, Yidden and Yiddenis spare no effort to make things that everything is Kedas V'Kedin, the mit alle Chumras. And yet, the same effort that we give for Esrig and for Lulav and for Pesach, we don't give for Tefilah. I mean, it's been mentioned several times already that Tefilah has Dvarim Ha'imdim Baruma Shalaylam, but everybody didn't finish the end of that sentence. So B'nei Adam Mizalzalin Bay. Treat it with disrespect. You know, in Yiddishkeit, there are people, we speak about someone, as a grace Lamden. Speak about somebody as a grace of Baki, a grace about Chesed, a grace about Stokke. How many times have you ever heard about somebody as a gewaldige Davener? The expression Kimat doesn't exist. And yet it's Dvar Ma'avim the Baruma Shalaylam, who B'nei Adam Mizalzalin Bay. In the hierarchy of things in Yiddishkeit, there are very few things that are higher than Tefilah. And yet, B'nei Adam Mizalzalin Bay. We don't give it the proper covet, we don't give it the proper effort, we don't daven correctly. Why is it Dvar Ma'avim Baruma Shalaylam? Why does it occupy such a high place in the hierarchy of things in Yiddishkeit? Well, one of the reasons is that every time a person davens, it's a declaration of his amunah and the Ribbon Shalom. There's very few times a day that we declare our amunah and Ribbon Shalom. But whether we realize it or not, Tefilah is an implicit recognition and declaration on our part that ich gleib in Gott. Because if you do gleibst nicht in Gott, then what on earth are you doing standing there davening? So wem redt there? Who are you talking to? The Ramban speaks us out al Torah. The Ramban says In Parshas Bay, the kavonas roimimis hakol betfilas. The kavonas botek neasiyais v'tchus hatfilas harabim. The institution of Beis HaKnesses, the concept of davening. Zeu sheyiyu lebnei adam makom yiskabsu, because there should be a place that Yidden can come together. V'yodu lakeil shebaram, and they're Meideh Ribbonei Shalom. You are my God, you are my Ribbonei Shalom, you are my Creator. V'yafarsu zeh v'yoimru lefanov bri'aisecha anachnu. Every time you daven, you're saying to the Ribbonei Shalom, ich gleib in Gott. It's a declaration of Emunah. So besides everything else, it's a declaration of that we're Yidden, that we believe that Ribbonei Shalom feared the Welt. That's what's happening. And if we think about it, it's a declaration that we believe that without Ribbonei Shalom nothing can happen. I don't know the last time you had a baby. You had an infant in your house. When you have an infant, a newborn, you realize that if you don't take care of that newborn will die. It is a helpless being. It cannot eat, it cannot do anything without you. Those are newborns. We think to ourselves, yeah, that's a newborn. But I can take care of myself. I can walk, I can talk, I can make parnasa. It's a toes. We're a bunch of babies, helpless babies. And if the Ribbonei Shalom wouldn't give us the breath to breathe and the koyach to walk and the koyach to talk, we would cease to exist like that little baby. You leave a baby don't care for chas v'shalom for 48 hours, he'll die. That's what we are. And that's what Tefilah is. It's an admission, and it's an admission, Ribbonei Shalom, dear, I can't exist. We shouldn't fool ourselves. And that's perhaps why we're mezalzel. Because the last thing a human being wants to do is admit that he's helpless. We hate to say that. We hate to admit, I need you. And Tefilah declares that. The Gemara says, Chizkiah Melech Yehuda was gone as a sefer harafuos. There was a medical book for different refuas, for different machlis. Chizkiah HaMelech, he hid the sefer harafuos because he didn't want people to rely on the refuas. He wanted people to come to the Ribbonei Shalom to daven and say, Ribbonei Shalom, I need a refua. So I once heard from Rav Gifter Zichronei Livrocha. What was his heter to do that? It's pikuach nefashos. How could he go and sefer harafuos? People needed it to get well. So Rav Gifter said, because there's something v'shteit hecher from afilu from pikuach nefashos. That's pikuach neshamas. Because if people have the sefer harafuos, they rely on that. They don't rely on the Ribbonei Shalom. And therefore the neshama shrivels up and dies. So das vekti b'afilu pikuach nefashos. And I realize that this is a kinus for men and not for women. But that's why it's vital that women should daven as well. Now, without getting into the machlekes, the Magen Avram and the Mishnah Berurah, how much a woman has to daven, what she has to daven, but it is important that everybody make sure that his wife davens. for no other reason that a woman has to have a relationship with Rebbeinu Shalom as well. And even if it's like the Moran Avram says, but she has to realize, Sedar Rebbeinu Shalom, and I have to talk to him, and I need him. And even if it's just Rebbeinu Shalom, will you please put this child to sleep? You say Tefilah according, at least Midaraisa. You know, when the Brisker Rov Zechat Tzadik Livrocha, people would come to him for eitzes, besides everything else. So the Brisker Rov was known. In the middle, people would asking for an eitzah. The Brisker Rov would pause and he would say, "Lishuasa kivisi Hashem." So someone had the temerity to ask the Brisker Rov, "What are you saying that for?" So the Brisker Rov says, "What do you think? Do you think I'm such a chacham that I think of these things myself? The Rebbeinu Shalom helps me. So somebody stumps me, and I don't know what to say. Lishuasa kivisi Hashem." Rav Chaim Shmulevitz used to matter sich on a rishon, on a tesis, and when he figured it out, he'd look up and he'd say, "Adankach Rebbeinu Shalom." Because he understood the tesis, because Rebbeinu Shalom finally was Meir Einav. So fretzach the kshaila. So why don't we take it more seriously? If it's so fundamental, dvar man shal olam. It's a declaration of Amunah. So why taka not? So I think part of the answer is because we've been disappointed too many times. And when you do something, you do it over again and over again, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So we lose faith in it. We have davened for too many people who did not survive. We have davened for parnasa that never materialized. We have davened for children that they shouldn't give us grief. We have davened for children that should get married. We have davened for babies that were never born. And the list goes on. And that's the way human beings are. When you do something over and over and quote isn't successful, then you give up. So one of the answers to this issue, which is a very important issue, which has already been mentioned by the Morda Asra, and this is mukach from kol ha'teira kula, that there's never, ever, ever a tefillah that goes to waste. Somewhere, sometime, someplace, for someone, that tefillah helps. Nor ein raya. The hour is late. Steht in Posuk. Rebbeinu Shalom is about to destroy the cities of Sodom and Amorah. Sagt der Posuk, V'Hashem Amar Hamechas Ani me'Avrom Asher Ani Yoseh. Rebbeinu Shalom Kaviyochel has a conversation with himself. He's about to destroy Sodom and Amorah. So he says, Kaviyochel, Rebbeinu Shalom says, can I not tell Avrom that I'm about to destroy Sodom? Avrom Avinu, der Baal Chesed, Avdi Yata, my entire Avrom, I'm not going to tell him about it? I have to tell him. The next pasuk is a non sequitur. The next pasuk doesn't fit in. Va'avram hayo yiyeh l'goy gadol v'yotzim v'nivruchu bay kol geyeh haaretz. And then weiter zurück zu Sodom. Vayem Hashem zaka Sodom v'amor ki rabba v'chatasam ki chavda ma'ay. What is that pasuk of Avram Hoya Yil Goy Gadol doing in the middle of this narrative? It has nothing to do with what's before. It has nothing to do with what's after. The Rebbe has to declare Avram Hoya Yil Goy Gadol. What's the pshat? Zot der Dubner Magid. That the Rebbe Shalom is Kaviyachol saying to himself, I know what's going to happen. I have to tell Avram because he's Avram Avdi. He's going to go ahead and he's going to daven. Savet is telfen. Because Stom and Amir are doomed. He's going to daven and people know that he's going to daven and it's not going to help. And he or perhaps his descendants are going to come to the conclusion, as Tefilah helft nicht. Avram Avinu daven und garnished helfen. Zok der Ribbana Shalom nein. V'Avram hoyo yil goy godol. It may not help for Stom, it may not help for now, but sometimes, someplace, for thy sein Kinderlach and sein Enechlach, se wird jo helfen. That's V'Avram hoyo yil goy godol. And for them it's going to help. And that's what we have to tell ourselves. That someplace, sometime, somewhere, for someone it's going to help. I'll tell you our Maisa Shahaya. I heard this from the people in Lev Lachim. So given a kleine shul on a street in Tel Aviv. It was time to daven mincha. They had 9 people. Somebody goes out in the street and wants to get at center. I don't know how you say it in Eretz Yisrael. At center, it's an asiri tzavos. Or he wants to get a 10th person. Some Israeli walks by. Achiloini, a frayid, a young guy. They say to him, can you come in and make a minyan? He said, leave me alone. Not interested. I don't daven. He says, listen, it's going to take 10 minutes. Please come in, make a minyan. Ani lo mu'inyan, which means bug off. He says, please, we need a minyan. It's not going to cost you anything. The kid comes into it's a teenager, a young man in his early 20s, comes into the Beis HaKnesses, Bo Rei. It was the first time he was in a shul in his life. In Eretz Yisrael. He goes, stays there for Mincha, Ashrei, Kaddish, Shmini Esrei, Chazoras Hashat, Stachnun, Kaddish, Aleinu, Kaddish. The guy's blown away. What made the restoration on him? This is the Pella. Made the restoration is that they come to Yehesh Meirabah Yed Einer Shreit. It's loud, it's noisy. Comes to Shmini Esrei, Shah still. Which, if you think about it, is a Pella. 10 Yid in the room, and everybody's quiet. Which, by the way, I may add as an aside, one of the ushers at MetLife Stadium, you know what the biggest pellet to him was? It wasn't the Menal's drasha. It wasn't even my drasha. The biggest pellet to him was that it came to Meir of Nachazai Yeshmei Rabbah, and it was silence. He says, you know how many times in MetLife Stadium we ask for a moment of silence for somebody or another? And nobody pays attention. Okay, fine, it's a little silent. He was shash still. That's what I made a ratio on this kid. I gets it to make a long story short. This guy today is a Fruma Yid. From that one time in the Beis Medrash, Beis HaKnesses in Tel Aviv. His parents' friends asked the parents of this boy that became a dati, what happened to your son? Where did you go wrong? So the father explained, I'll tell you what happened. This is the father of the boy. He says, my father was a Fruma Yid, an Erlich Yid, a Europe Yid. He came to Eretz Yisrael. And I, the son, the middle generation, wanted nothing to do with the Yiddishkeit. Nicht kein Shabbos, nicht kein Yontif, nicht kein Yom Kippur, nicht kein Mezuzah, gar nicht. But my father, I left it. So the man tells his friends, he says, that shul that my son went into, that was the Beis HaMedrash that my father davened in. And my son, unbeknownst to him, went into his Zayde shul. Ad kan de Maisa. Zog ich habir. Efshe. How many tefillas did that Zayde daven when he saw that his son threw it all away? How many tefillas, how many demos was that person moirid that he saw that his son isn't from and his Einoch isn't from and garnished? When Seken Zayin, he went to his kever thinking, this is a garnished geblieben von mir. Und the tefillas, quote, haben sie nicht geholfen. And he was wrong. Because no tefillah ever goes to waste. And that's what we have to bear in mind. And that's why it is vitally important that when a person davens, he always must believe my tefillahs can work. Because there's an axiom in Hilchos Tefilah, and that is the more you believe in your davening, the more effective they are. And the less you believe in your davening, the less effective they are. And the vicious cycle that we have to be on guard for is, well, if I daven and it doesn't work, so I stop believing in it. If I stop believing in it, it's less effective. When it's less effective, it doesn't work. V'chuli, v'chuli, v'chayser, chalila, it's a vicious cycle. And if you want to raya l'davar, on Rosh Hashanah, we're going to learn the Haftarah of Chana and Elkanah and Shmuel. State in Seder Olam that how many years did Chana daven for a baby without her tefillas being answered? 19 years. After 19 years, she decides, I'm going to go up to the Mishkan in Shilai. What took her 19 years? So good, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10. The teretz is, my man gets to the Mishkan. Elkanah goes to the Mishkan. So Chana stood home. My husband's going to daven for me. But in year number 19, Vayomer lo Elkanah Yishua, Chana, lama sivki, v'lama lo seichli, v'lama yera levavech, haloi anochi toiv loch me'asar avonim. What do you have to cry for? I'm better than 10 children. When Chana heard those words, she read between the lines. If he's telling me already, don't worry, you have me. Ich bin besser von 10 Kinder. Chana said, oh, he doesn't believe in it anymore. He thinks it's a hopeless case. His tefillahs aren't going to be effective. Evazeh, I have to go. That's what happened in year 19. What's the takeaway message? Takeaway message is believe in your tefillahs in order for they to be effective. and never stop davening. And if they haven't worked for you, maybe they'll work in the future. And if they don't work for you, they'll work for somebody else. This is the year of Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. We're coming up to the 50th yard site. The year Rabbi Aaron was nifter, there was a terrible drought in Eretz Yisrael. Didn't rain. It's already Kislev. Didn't rain. So there's a skula that when a tzaddik is nifter, if they bury him with a wet rag, so he'll be asked by the Rebbeinu Shalom to give rain. They did that. They put that in the Oren apparently, or in the Kever. Lo and behold, after the Kfura, it rained. They went to Rabbi Yankiv Kamenetsky and said, boy, Ray, the school works. Rabbi Yankiv said, you know why it rained? Because the B'nai Chutz La'aretz started saying V'sein Talamotar because it was December 4th. What do you think? We're a bunch of shlemiels over here in Chutz La'aretz. Ganz Chutz La'aretz start saying V'sein Talamotar, Sa'at HaRoshim. Every tefillah helps. I would not believe this story had I not read it, and I read it from a Neman, Reb Aryeh Zev Ginsburg. He writes that he had a balabas in his shul that had a son, a kid born on Long Island, went to Eretz Yisrael, joined the Israeli army. The year is 2005. The Israeli government decides that they're going to evacuate the people from Gaza. He's assigned to go ahead and to be one of the soldiers that kicks out the Yidden from Gaza. He protests because it's against his principles. What are we throwing out Yidden from that which is Eretz Yisrael? He goes to his commanding officer, says, I don't want to participate. I don't believe in this. I think it's wrong. Commanding officer says to him, orders are orders. Either you do this or you be court-martialed. So he goes to Gaza together with his company and together with his commanding officer, and they go and they get the people in the shul, and they have a kinus, and the Rav says to the people, there should be no shvichas domim. We should go peacefully. He's there with the Rav and the commanding officer, this young soldier. A kitzur, they're getting on the bus. What does he do? He takes his siddur right outside the shul, and he buries his siddur in the ground. That one day, Mitzvah Hashem, we should come back to this place, and Sayyid will find the siddur. Gets on the bus, and he leaves Gaza. 1 year later, 2006, the Palestinians, Yimach Shemam, capture a soldier named Gilad Shalit. Israeli army goes back into Gaza. He goes back into Gaza. He comes there, it's a churban. Everything that existed wasn't there anymore. Those Rishoyim, those Chayis rows, they burned the shuls, they burned the greenhouses. There was nothing. There was nothing recognizable. He comes into the Gaza inexplicably. Gas. He's out there in the field, doesn't know where he is. He starts digging in the ground. He finds his siddur. So I'm not making this story up. It's a plea. He finds the siddur that he buried a year before. He calls his father, Mice and Nace. His father goes to Rabbi Ginsburg, his Rav, says, what's the pshat? Rabbi Ginsburg says, I don't know the pshat. This requires the Gadol Ador. He arranges that this guy goes into Reb Chaim Kanievsky's Ol Gesut and Stark Sein. He says, Maisa Shoi Kachoya, I went to Gaz, I buried the siddur, I came back a year later, I found the siddur. What does it mean? Reb Chaim asks him, says, when your commanding officer asks you to evacuate the people, what did you do? He says, I protested. He said, then what happened? He says, I got to do it. He says, then what did you do? Then I started davening that it shouldn't happen. That at the end, the Israeli government should change their mind, it shouldn't happen. And then what happened? So I stopped davening. Reb Chaim told him, you stopped davening? Never stop davening. And when the Rebbeinu Shalom was mazmin you, that siddur he was telling you, don't stop davening. You know, the Welt says there are no atheists in the foxholes. And when people need something, they start davening. Amol, you notice a guy in shul, and you see that he's davening with Gresser, his Slavus. Whenever I see that, I always say to myself, I wonder what's going on in his life. I once heard from a parent who had a child that left the fold. The father said that he got a new appreciation, a new taich in davening. He said, when he said the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Mechayim Meisim, he had kavanah, Rebbeinu Shalom, bring back my dead child. When he said, Baruch Atah Hashem Chayna Adoas, he said, Rebbeinu Shalom, give me the seichel how to handle this. When he said, Reifei Chayla Amu Yisrael, he said, Rebbeinu Shalom, give him a refuas hanefesh. When he said, Sim Shalom, he says, Rebbeinu Shalom, please bring Shalom back to my house. Because when it counts, and the chips are down, and we're up against the wall, then we all become great daveners. The problem is, as when es geht gut, then we don't have time for davening. And that is such a fundamental error. Because as the Gemara the Asur alluded to, the Gemara says, Omar Ablezer, Lo'olam yaktim Adam Tefilah L'tzara. You know why Lo'olam yaktim Adam Tefilah L'tzara? Everything is great. The parnas is great, the gezunt is great, your children are great, shalom bayis is great, everything is great. Zok the Gemara, that's the time to daven. Because Amol, the Rebbeinu Shalom, brings tzoros on people because I want to hear from you. So if you're a chachamena b'roishai, lo'olam yaktim Adam Tefilah L'tzara, then I'm not going to need tzoros, I'm not going to need chayli, I'm not going to need the other tzoros to get me to daven. Because it can happen at any moment. A person's life can turn around from good to bad in an instant by stepping off a curb. Life is tenuous. So how do we become better daveners? So the tried and true method which always works, is if you're ma'ayin in any sugya, you become more zohar in it. And so felt mishais heinz svarim on davening. And it'll improve your davening. But I have one suggestion tonight, besides the obvious. And that is that we should start being mechaven in one line, 6 words of Shemoneh Esrei. The 6 words are, Hashem svasai tiftach ufi yagid tehilasecha. Because you know what that's saying? That's saying, I'm talking to the Ribbono Shel Olam. And maybe that seems obvious, but it's not. You know what I try to be mechaven when I say the words, Hashem svasai tiftach? If you've ever been in court, and the lawyer wants to come to the judge, he says, Your Honor, may I approach the bench? That's Hashem svasai tiftach ufi yagid tehilasecha. I'm talking to the Melech Malchei Hamlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I have to act the part and look the part and talk the part. You know, it's a pella. It's a scary pella. Rav Chaim al Rambam says, let's see, I'm for a steer in Rambam with this. But Rav Chaim says, and I say shit in Rambam, that's Rav Chaim, that if a person does not realize when he daven that it's Shechinasai Kenegdai, he's not Yaitse davening. You know how scary that is? A Yid can daven 3 times a day for 50, 60, 70 years. Never misses a davening. He goes up to the Kisei HaKovod Lachar Mei V'Eshrim, and they say to him, Farvas hast du nicht gedavent? The person says, was heißt? Ich habe nicht gedavent? If you don't realize that Shechinah Kenegda, you're not yet Shemoneh Esrei. And we can emphasize that and do that. And I don't have to say this to this island. But you have to dress the part. I mean, people, on this, I'm speaking to the converted over here. But people daven in their shirt sleeves. They daven without a jacket. I don't want to be Melamed Chayva, but there was an article in one of the magazines this week about the in Slotsburg, the mincha where they daven mincha. And all these pictures, people davening, Zer Shein. Over 90% of them, uncane jacket, uncane hat, uncane tie. Where's the Shechinah Kenegda? You'd appear in front of a judge like that? If you're trying to make a sale, you'd appear in front of a client like that? And, as been emphasized, this is the Ribbono Shel Olam's house. Behave like that. Result in Michael sein. But the Israeli ambassador, his name is Yehuda Avner, to the country of Great Britain, he's a Fruma Yid. When he had to present his credentials to the Queen of England, so they gave him a whole shiur of how he has to act by handing his credentials of the ambassadorship to the Queen of England. Zel Shainai. I was escorted into the Queen's chamber by a chamberlain dressed like the Duke of Wellington. I executed the rehearsed choreography with due aplomb, bowing at the door, walking 2 steps forward, bowing again, 2 more steps forward, bowing once more, and proclaiming, Your Majesty, I have the honor to present my credentials as ambassador of Israel to the court of St. James. Because you're talking to the Queen. I have news for you. I have more power than the Queen of England. Meretz the Queen. And the Ribbon Shalom. And this is the whole time he was sweating profusely. Again, you thought might mir Michael sein. But Ronald Reagan never took off his jacket in the Oval Office. Because it's the Oval Office. There is no basement minion in this city that's every basement minion in this city has more Kedusha than the Oval Office, which is something that need not be stated. Oval Office, Heint, Oval Office, Morgan, it's a building, it's nothing. A shul, a Beis HaKnesses. Kedusha's Beis HaKnesses, Mikdash Ma'at. Reminds me of the Pasuk in Malachi. Ben Yechavedov ve'eved Adoinov. V'im ov oni ayei chvoidi. V'im Adoinim oni ayei moiroi. Omar Hashem Tzvakos. I just want to end by reading you an incredible letter that Mrs. Esther Waxman wrote. Mrs. Esther Waxman was the mother of Nachshon Waxman. She wrote this letter on the 10th yahrzeit of Nachshon Waxman. Who was Nachshon Waxman? Nachshon Waxman was an Israeli soldier, a Fruma Yid, even a yeshiva bocher, that was in the Israeli army. He was hitchhiking home, and made the tragic mistake of getting picked up by a car that was full of Palestinians. And they kidnapped him and they demanded the release of, I think, 400 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for him. This she writes on his 10th yahrzeit. Listen to this woman. They gave an ultimatum that by Friday, 8 p.m., either they released the prisoners or they killed Nachshon Waxman. On Thursday night, 24 hours before the ultimatum, a prayer vigil was held. This is written for a Fraya Oilam, was held at the Western Wall. And at the same hour, prayer vigils were held throughout the world in synagogues, schools, community centers. At the Western Wall, 100,000 people arrived with almost no notice. Hasidim in black frock coats and long side curls swayed and prayed and cried side by side with young boys in torn jeans and ponytails and earrings. There was total unity and solidarity of purpose among us, religious and secular, left-wing and right-wing, Sephardi and Ashkenazi, old and young, rich and poor, an occurrence unprecedented in our sadly fragmented society. On Friday night, we ushered in the Sabbath, and I spoke to my son on the media and begged him to be strong, for all the people were with him. We sat rooted at the Sabbath table, my eyes glued to the door, expecting Nachshon to walk in at any moment. We were not aware of the fact that Israeli intelligence had captured the driver of the car that picked up Nachshon, and that he had told all our intelligence that the terrorists had worn kippot, and there was a Bible and a siddur on the dashboard and Hasidic music playing on the tape deck, and an unsuspecting soldier got into the car. We were not aware that they had discovered from their informant that Nachshon was being held in a village called Bir Nabala under Israeli rule located about 10 minutes from our home in Ramot. We were not aware that Prime Minister Rabin had made a decision to launch a military action to attempt to rescue our son. At the hour of the ultimatum, at 8 p.m., Friday night, General Yoram Yair, not Nachshon, walked through our door and brought us the terrible news. The military rescue attempt had failed. Nachshon had been killed, and so had the commander of the rescue team, Captain Nir Poraz. On Saturday night at midnight, we buried our son. Now listen to this. This is incredible. My husband's greatest concern when burying his son was that there would be a crisis in faith. And so he asked Rabbi Elon to tell everyone that just as a father always likes to say yes to all of his children's requests, sometimes he had to say no, though the child might not understand why. So our Father in heaven heard our prayers, and though we don't understand why, his answer was no. The entire nation mourned. Thousands came to comfort us, though no one can comfort a bereaved parent. Then she writes, after the Shiva, we returned to our routines. Our son, who had just gotten out of the army, attended Hebrew University, and another went back to the army. For that is what the Jewish people have done always. Rebuilt after destruction, began new lives from ashes and the blood of the old. Seken Zayin. That the reason these people, his parents, survived, and that a woman, a mother, can write a letter like this on the 10th yortzeit of her son, is because those thousands of tefillahs may not have helped to save Nachshon, but it gave them the koyach and the mut and the strength to carry on. Because no tefillah goes to waste. And unfortunately, when we hear of people dying of cancer in the hospital and they're beyond all hope, we still daven for them. For them, that they shouldn't suffer, that it should be a kapora for the neshama, that they should have a licht to Gan Eden, or that some other person should have a refuah. But that's what we have to believe. No tefillah goes lashov. Somewhere, sometime, someplace, it has an effect. And as we enter the Yom Neroyim, the Rebbeinu Shalom, Shameh Tefilas Amcha Yisrael Barachimim should be Shameh Tefilas. It should be the gates and the end of all of our tzaras, and we should see Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mehera V'Amen. Amen.